Hello, I'm Lowell, he, him, and welcome to another episode of the Open Hearth podcast. This show draws on the experience and play of the Open Hearth Gaming Community. We're an online TTRPG gaming group which plays many kinds of games in gaming, story games, OSR, we've got some people that do solo now, and more. We have mandatory use of safe tools for all the play that happens in our community, and that's all supported by a calendar app that we have, and then we also have a Discord. As usual, we've brought on a pair of community members, people who've played in the community, to talk about their gaming. I want to introduce them because they're kind of outstanding folks. We have with us Kieron Gillen, who wrote for Star Wars Darth Vader, Young Avengers Eternals, and is the creator and writer for The Wicked and the Divine, the Power Fantasy, and of course, Die, and then the Die RPG, all of which are amazing. Kieron, thank you for joining us today.
I'm blushing. Thank you for having me.
And then we have Kat Rambo, who, a full disclosure, is my sister, but who is also the author of the Beasts of Tobacco Quartet, as well as the Disco Space Opera Trilogy, several collections of short stories, and two-time president of the Science Fiction Writers of America. Kat, thank you for coming on.
You are very welcome. Thank you for the invitation.
For our first segment, we have everyone kind of tell us about how their recent games have gone, and then talk with us a little more about something they've played, read, or watched. So, Kieron, tell us about what you've been playing and one thing you want to talk about.
It's been a weird year, but it always is. I've got a 3-year-old, so my time's crunched. I don't really get a lot of time to play much, but the last few months have been good. As in terms of, I've been genuinely doing things. I finished a Between campaign. We ran a quite lengthy, to the end, mastermind died in an enormous crystal dimension, falling apart ball. It's all the ridiculous gothic ludicrousness you would want. I found running that really hard. The players loved it. I found it really very hard. The cognitive load was really very big for me, and it's I was aware that the game was going well, but I could have ran it better. That I found fascinating, and that kind of leads to what I'm going to be talking about. I've been playing Criminal, Ed Brubaker and Sean Phillips. Excellent comic. They've got a Christmas special coming out, which will be out by now, I believe. And they asked Kieron, do you want to do an RPG for us? So I said, sure, Ed. So I did the 6-page little RPG, which is a little story game thing. It's clearly been influenced by the Paragon system and stuff like the Resistance. So it's basically a storytelling game where you're doing a story of a heist in flashback. You're all holding sets of cards, and you're trying to basically play higher cards to take over the narrative, and you go for the structure, and at the end, everyone has a secret objective. The cards in your hand reveal whether the secret objective happens, and ideally, and all the playtests have ended like this, one player gets shot in the back of the head after ripping off all the money to pay for something else, and etc., etc. Definitely the great moment in the game is when someone says, oh, my mission is to kill a rat, and I've succeeded, I will kill any rats in the room, and the next player goes, well, that was fun to do. And the Scions, which is the other game I've been playing a lot, which is my actual other game I've been designing, which is a Paragon hack, and it's basically Horus Heresy 'em up, and it's me basically doing a very high-level game of Empire stuff. Paragon can do any amount of narrative in a single dice pool, so the idea is that could be a novel's worth of stuff. The vibe it kind of gives you is like when you're reading histories of Julius Caesar, and it's like a paragraph starts, Julius Caesar goes off and kills all the pirates, and then he comes back. That's it. It motors.
I haven't heard anybody change the time scale of Aegon, so that's really interesting to me.
That's the bit that absolutely works. There's other stuff that we're teething. It's very card-driven. We use the cards as... It's too complicated to explain. But a lot of the character sheets are put on cards, and also tokens on cards become the bonds, and it also maps faction threats, it maps scenarios, it maps... All the other stuff is physical on the board and makes the game quite brutal, and it ends in a civil war where the Empire burns down. I would love to talk about that, evidently. Not what I'm going to talk about. I'm going to talk about Mythic Bastionland, which I love. I followed playing the Between with Mythic Bastionland, and I'm surprised, oh my, this is exactly my sweet spot in terms of a certain kind of play. I was shocked. Mythic Bastionland is, I describe it as micro Pendragon. So many people say they want to play the Great Campaign, and of course they don't because we don't have the time. I can't lift the character sheets anymore, there are far too many rules. But the idea of doing what is basically the thrill of Pendragon, as in you are knights on quests, dealing with myths and generational play. The game is very good at... And now we skip forward in time. We leave stuff unresolved. At the end of a session, do we go forward a week? Do we go forward a season? Do we go forward 15 years? It drills down really interestingly into some core Pendragon stuff, which works great. The bit that sold me on it when I first flicked through was the aging rules are really good. And this is a ludicrous thing to care about. It's like, young to mature, you re-roll your stats, and if they're higher, you keep them. If you go from mature to old, you re-roll your stats, and if you're lower, you keep them. And then every time you're old and you go up an era, you lose D12 from your health. This very exquisitely gives you a blooming and a slow, decrepit collapse. But what I really find interesting is how it allows me to pick up what my old school GMing style was before I got heavily into story games. I'm a faction-based GM player. I will set up problems, I'll set up a situation with all stuff. I won't do any actual plotting. And this is kind of the writer in me coming out. I'll play people reasonably. Do the hex map, and you start using prompts. And this is quite interesting. I find it like being on Tumblr, or these are writing prompts, essentially. You regularly just turn to the dice, and I generate this whole setup, which I end up just ripping off the book by Stephen Donaldson's Mordant's Need. I'm about to spoil Mordant's Need, everybody, for old books. But like, I've rolled the Fox Knight, who's got illusion skills as a kind of an injury and migration. That's his background. And from that, I get, oh, he must have migrated there, he got hurt. So he's lying on his bed for 15 years. And then, of course, he's the Fox Knight, so he has to be faking. So I've just got that as a basic setup. And you've got these tiny little bits of fiction. You don't need a lot. And you've got a fairly fertile existence that feels very real when they go into it. So I'm making very sensible decisions as they move through, as in, I know what's going on in the world in the larger sense. And then there's a distortion of it, as in the myths. Yes, there's stuff on the map for the players to discover, but it's not a classic hex crawl and kind of discovering what's in this hex. There's basically a 50% chance of bumping into a myth. 2/3 of the time it'll be the nearest one, the other one is just a random one. And the myths basically play out a series of prompts, and these are like a 2-sentence encounter prompt. If you read them ahead, you may actually do a bit of prep, but in reality, most of them you're just saying, what is the situation they're in? How will that appear? So, for example, I reached prompt 4 with the Goblin or something, or maybe prompt 5, and the Goblin is the Lord of all lost things. That's his vibe. And they just got into their first battle against the raiders who've come into the kingdom. That's my old school GMing skills. We're doing an actual big political Excalibur-like thriller, and then it's distorted by things which are entirely unpredictable. The idea that how does these creatures of myth intersect, and it becomes magical, because I don't really know what's going to happen. The intersection between the structure, the prompts being very, very good in terms of just slight pricks to lead you to places, the OSR-ness of just going with it, but applied with enough story game tech, or enough story game GM side, to make a situation. And I find small examples really good. I rolled up an evil renegade alchemist, got a pet dog, he's got a load of little rabid dogs, he clearly hates everybody. That's his whole vibe. And I just have him like, okay, he's the quartermaster. Fantastic. The player's going. I'll just make a straight reaction roll, because that's what it says. Roll, first one gets a 6. And I'm like, clearly in love with the player. Rolls up, like, I love you. And then he roll for the next one, 5 again. And this guy also loves it. And then I roll for the third one. It's another 5. And so this guy, he hates everybody else, loves the players, and is constantly trying to be nice to them. That's incredibly funny. And that's never a choice I would ever have made in a million years. That's a wonderful bit of fiction of the evil alchemist who just wants to give the player stuff. It's just given me very little and also a lot.
Mm-hmm.
There's something really appealing about it to me, and I'm loving it. And the players have asked me to expand the campaign, which is normally a good sign.
When you start to GM this, did you do the process like going, okay, here are the X number of myths that we're going to be playing with? What was that like?
Bless the community, there's some really good tools. There's multiple map generators, there's multiple tabletops for storing information. I actually use multiple of the generators, depending which one I think works best. So in my case, I generated a map, and then I just started adding the regions manually. So I thought, where is a good place to put this sage? Where is a good place to put the myths? So I've generated the myths randomly, but I put them deliberately where I thought was interesting on the map. One of the interesting things about the myths is there's a variety of scale. On one hand, you've got a myth like the Pack, which is some wolves going rabid, but it's about the uprising of these animals. So it's a kind of classic hunting down wolves encounter, but very atmospheric. And then you've got something like the Wheel of Time. Every time that you get a myth, it goes forward a season or a year. So the entire country's changing. They've hit one which is the Mist, which means the second that happens, Mist is now over the kingdom forever. And it gets worse and worse as the myths go up. And we've just gone forward 15 years and they never dealt with the Mist. So there's been 15 years this kingdom's been missed. And can you imagine the sheer Excaliburian depression of this game? That's what I love, how the myths just kick it. You're running a normal game and then you've got this very big overriding thing. Like they're petrified of the Hydra. The Hydra's indestructible, they've realised. It's still out there, and all they know is they've got to endure it. It's going to inevitably turn up in the middle of the Civil War and eat an army. At the moment where we're up to, they're marching the army out, the Lord's gone up through his bed, there's going to be a big battle, multiple armies clashing, and the myths could just turn up and ruin what appears to be a pretty good historical setup. Ruin is the wrong word, but turn it into, well, I guess myth.
That's awesome. Kat, I don't know how much you've heard about Mythic Bastionland.
No, I've been listening enthralled and worried that I need to get quite so crunchy with my game description.
The thing about this game is the rules are quite short, there's 20 pages, but he writes it in almost like haiku-like density. And you see the people on the forums picking up, oh yeah, 2 lines later, explains something completely different. Explanations are for cowards. He's got a really good bit at the back of the book, which I think is genius, and I'm going to rip off, is that he puts all the extended examples at the back on a page like character generation or what if you do if you make a mistake. And they've got an example of play of going through that, and then he's got commentary on the right. So basically, here's how it could go, and then he comments, I wouldn't have done this, maybe. And that is a really living way to actually show you how the game works, both the thinking behind it and also the practice. It's really smart. I think the fact the small little crunchies are so interesting and miniature captured my mind. I'm quite crunchy, I guess, in my heart of hearts.
I love the idea of an act that you're doing as a GM here of poetic interpretation that is there and is in something like Thousand Islands and some of the best of the OSR style games that really lead into a beautiful picture of a place.
It actively encourages you to roll the weather each day. 2 DD12s, and each one is like streaky clouds or glowing rain or something like that. One of the real ones, the players that always realise what's a myth and what's just the place is weird. It's that middle bit in Excalibur where the knights go out on the Grail quest. If they're wandering around, they don't really understand what's happening. They know it's scary.
That sounds great. I'm so glad to hear you talk about that. A kind of a different approach from Horst talked about this right at the beginning of the year, what this is doing for him as OSR perspective. So that's very cool. Kat, can I transition over to you and ask you to tell us about your recent gaming?
Yeah, I'm usually playing in several different campaigns. I'm actually playing in one that you're running, Mutants and Masterminds, where I'm playing a gender-flipped Wolverine, so it's a small, angry Canadian woman. And I think I might be in the process of leading the group down the dark path because I've met up with Aquaman, who's an eco-terrorist, and I might have just talked to Magneto about sheltering some youth. So
You certainly have leaned the political arrow in that game in a very different direction. I love it.
yeah. And so that's a very different game than one of the systems I play on Saturday nights with folks that I played with in high school and their children, which is a lot of fun, is classic D&D. And we're playing 5e, and there's 3 different campaigns going because we've got 3 different DMs. I've tried to move them to something that I would run, but I'm much more interested in running something that's powered by the apocalypse, something that's kind of storytelling leaning. And so far, the older dudes do not understand the concept of storytelling. I want to make story-based choices, and one of them is kind of like, how do I max my spell casting efficiency? Let me measure this out. And you remember like Champions back in the day where you would just break out the heavy-duty calculus book in order to figure out this variable power pool. My problem is that I got spoiled by Powered by the Apocalypse because I ran in that Hearts of Woolen game that Lowell ran in Apocalypse Keys. It's just so much fun when everybody's riffing and the story is going well and there's that kind of collaborative act going on where people are also handing off the narrative. Everybody is not kind of like, I am the hero of this story and now my dwarf barbarian will do X or Y. And I don't mean to bitch about my D&D group because
That's a classic thing, though.
we all get together and drink heavily, and it's much about that, I think, as anything. Speaking of Powered by the Apocalypse, I actually ran Thirsty Sword Lesbians for my church because I've been doing board game stuff over at Unitarian Universalist Church, and we're trying to be more welcoming congregation. And I was like, what's more welcoming than Thirsty Sword Lesbians? I ran a great few games of that, which I really enjoyed. And I don't know if this counts as playing the game, but I have been learning the Shadowrun system much more deeply because Lowell and I are writing a series of novellas in the Shadowrun universe. And we've turned in the first one and we're starting the second. And that has just been a blast. Speaking about collaborative storytelling, there's something just really pleasant about like, here's a scene. Oh, okay, your turn. That is, I think, one of the things that I get out of games nowadays is that storytelling.
Is that what you'd like to talk about, the Shadowrun thing?
I'm torn because it's that, or I want to complain about this game I have not had a chance to run because circumstances keep changing. And I want to use Powered by the Apocalypse rules, but I don't know which, because I've looked at a bunch of them and I'm probably going to have to twitch something together.
Give us the pitch.
It's monsters in a retirement home in southern Florida. It's called Villa Encantata. I have all these little strands I want to do. There's going to be all these people with variations on the name Elizabeth. I'm going to see how long it takes them to get to the fact that, like, oh, there's Betsy and Betty and Liz. And so I hope none of them, anybody that's ever going to play this game, is listening. But I was going to do it on Twitch, and I actually got a couple of friends to say they'd play. And then just circumstances got flaky. And then I tried to break the D&D group into something like this. Some of them were ready, and some were less ready. I remain thwarted. I don't know why I want to do it. I think I got very excited. I actually, in Canva, I drew up the retirement home brochure in the different models of the houses you could buy, and had really a lot of fun. Here's the weird little details for them.
Now, you've read through Monster Hearts. Is that what you're kind of thinking about as maybe?
I think so, but I also want to get that flavor of I once was really potent and powerful, and now I only have so many spoons to get through the day with. I think it is a game all the baby boomers, all of us that grew up with D&D might identify with, certainly. Maybe this is something to be fun to do as a book. Maybe this is something to be fun as screenplay, but why not all of these things?
Kieron, I'll throw to you before I game-splain, think of ideas, make pitches for how this should be done here.
Yeah. But I thought I was going to talk about playtesting or hacking. I'm hacking Paragon at the moment. It feels incredibly arrogant to think that I'm going to change something that John Harper thought was a good idea. What am I doing removing this entire subsystem? The problem with me as a designer versus me as a games master, I've run an entire game and the players say, oh no, it would be better if you did this. And I was like, yeah, that's the rules. I just DM'd it wrong. Role-playing games, there's so many interesting liminal spaces between choices and where actually is it. When I was designing Die, there's a whole period I never knew which one was the main project. And I now think of it as two ways looking at the same material.
Yeah.
And that was a really fruitful way for me to work on that because they fed each other. Ideas from one germinated into the other and they became their own sort of thing, but they're very much big plot beats from one jump to the other. I was trying to solve player elimination because the game is very deliberately, people die very easily. It's really good at the end game because it means that it's very tense. It's not great all the way through. So if someone dies, what happens? They get up and they become what we call fallen. They walk around a semi-zombie state with their emotions and feeling terrible. But they become alive if they eat another player. And that means the end game is doubly tense for another way because it's a game about do you go home or not? And only live people go home. So it's this kind of like, what are people willing to do? And that is something which was to come from the game, but wasn't in the story to begin with. And suddenly it's where all the fallen you meet are in fact players. I didn't put that in the story originally. And that's such a fundamental part. Even they're calling fallen. The other thing I found really useful developing two at once, you may find this interesting, Kat, is you're thinking about it twice as much.
Mm-hmm.
You've got an excuse to think about it from a different angle. So you can't just put it away. You're kind of refreshed by looking at it a different way. I do recommend it if you can. I haven't an idea that's felt like two at once since, though.
Mechanically, I'll mention for PBTA, one of the interesting games that you might look at is Masks, because there are two things happening in Masks that I think could map to what you're talking about. One is that your stats are about how other people picture you.
Oh, interesting.
Are you more dangerous or less dangerous? Are you more weird or less weird? It's kind of a meeting point of how other people have their impression of you and how you feel about yourself. And then you kind of have to shift sometimes your stats to do something right. But the other thing is all of the moves that these teen characters do are shitty. There is no absolute victory on any of them.
Okay.
Because they don't have full control of things. When they go to like manipulate somebody, it's always going to have a little bit of fallout because they just can't. And when they grow up, they can do an adult move and then it actually has a good success state. I think that's a really interesting way to show that this character maybe isn't what they used to be. When you get it put together, I'll get you set up and you can run it on Open Hearth and there will be people that would want to play it. So no worries about that.
Every time I played on Open Hearth, it's just been high caliber players.
I literally joined the Open Hearth because I wanted to play with more experienced people who knew games better than I did. Because when you're at home, you're regularly setting up games. You're probably the most experienced person because you're doing that work. And that's not necessarily good for you as a player in that way. Every time I playtest anything in the Open Hearth, it's been great. The feedback's been wonderful. It's been really lovely.
We're doing lots and lots of Star Trek adventures, which I'm really enjoying. We've been playing Band of Blade, which is what I talked about last time. I just started a playtest of a campaign frame for Girl by Moonlight, which is a dark academia. Basically, the school is trying to eat you setup for Girl by Moonlight. And we're doing Mutants and Masterminds. Fourth edition of that, the playtest version, came out. It made some nice changes. We swapped everybody over to that. And then we've been playing Rapscallion. I backed the Kickstarter. This came out a while ago in an ashcan form from Magpie. It kind of fell through the cracks while Magpie was working on Avatar and other things, but eventually it came out. Rapscallion is a fantasy pirate game, much more emphasis on the fantasy side of things. We've got Seventh Sea, and there's a bunch of other pirate games out there that want to be historical verisimilitude, but then have some magic, or else they've got Cthulhu in there. I can think of 3 different pirate Cthulhu games. This is very much a fantasy game. It is powered by Apocalypse, and it has some tweaks to the formula. Once I kind of got it, that has shaped all of my vision of playing it, is that the world that you're in, the environment that you're in, whether you're at sea or in these islands, like the world itself is magical and transforms you. So the longer you're in a particular situation, the more that you can be changed by it. Having that as a thought in the back of my head whenever we're playing. We've got the classic character playbooks. We've also got ship playbooks. We've got our captain. We've got our navigator. We've got the ship rat. And there's a real classic, but the playbooks are very rich. They're very baked into the world. Each one has these 3 oddities that are very distinct, like features that they would have that completely change who they are. Like we've got the chronicler. This is our scholar character. And they can be a sea scholar, in which case they are a scholar of sea monsters. That's what they're into. That's what they're about. That they're pursuing them. They have bonuses for looking into them. They can call up information on them. Or they can be fox eye, which means that they can see into people's hearts. That's what they're about, is reading other people's lives and hearts and so on. Or they're letterborn, which means that they are literally a book, because in this whole game, books are magical by their nature and become jinn, become creatures of air, and that's all tied into things. These are some of the richest playbooks I've ever seen in terms of what it gives you at the start. So I really like that about it. And again, lots of fantasy bullshit in there. I love having all of that stuff in it. Got a good play structure. It's got a downtime phase that when you go to port, there are these moves that get activated that you can do to get new resources, add to the game. If you roll well at sea, you can also get a downtime phase. I kind of like that. It's something I hadn't seen in a lot of straight PBTA. It's usually a Forts in the Dark thing. It does have a weird break in that the standard moves, there are things you can't do with them that I would expect you to be able to do. I'm talking around it. The game is really, really messy, which I'll come back to. Lots of other fun little things. I love the way that it handles combat. If you do well in combat, you can get the ante, which is kind of a bond you can spend later. They've got tags on weapons, which is not normally a thing I like. You can spend the ante or a bond on a weapon to create an effect. One really cool, really hard mechanical thing is you've got a wound track for hit points, but then you also have troubles. These are conditions that you can take. You can have 4 of them, and then you've also got a 5th trouble that is your character's vice. Like the captain gets angry. The swashbuckler gets egotistical. These are ones that are really set to them that have bonus effects in addition to being a problem. When you clear them, can give you XP. But the thing I like about all these conditions is when you set a condition on somebody, the GM says, and this is how you clear that. You're jealous of this person. If you want to clear this, you need to show them up. The GM sets a term for that. That really makes those moments of giving those conditions to players as fallout for things and as costs feel much more interesting. There is a way for the player to resist it. Otherwise, there's a mechanic for that. But generally, the player is looking at that. Last session, Patrick got cursed because he was a swashbuckler. He's very much on ego. And the only way to remove the curse was to embarrass himself. Like he had to embarrass himself in front of other people. And he fought against that until he finally got a miss and he could play that out. Lots of really evocative mechanics baked in. There's some great ship stuff. They've got playbooks for the ships. There's moves for doing the ship stuff. The ship stuff is another place where there's some messiness. There's some contradictions between what's in the book and what's on the playbooks. There's some systems that we've read like 3 or 4 times and we're not sure how to do this. There's some bits where you're like, oh, we've got this maneuver in to go for an attack. And you're like, okay. And then you just go to standard moves. And I want an example of play so badly. I've never, from a PBTA, more wanted just a couple of pages of them to describe how they imagine these ship combats going. We've done them and they've been fun. I've really dug it, but at the same time, I feel like I'm missing something. The game wants you to collaboratively build the world. It says that right at the beginning. You build the sea. It has some stuff for how you're doing that. Kieron, like you said earlier, my favorite thing, which is we're going to build some factions. And it's got a list of them. There's the law, the free, and the weird. They have some examples in there. I built a bunch more that the players could choose from. We end up getting a nice mix of those. It wants you to collaboratively build, but it also has all of this lore and crazy bullshit baked into the game itself that makes it a little harder for players to know, especially right at the start, of what's their permission for setting things about the world. What can they establish? How far can we push that? And I think that's a real tension that we've seen in PBTA between games that go, okay, let's build the world together, and games that go, look, I have a very cool setting for you. And I think this game really exhibits that in a strong way. I really have enjoyed it. Pirates wouldn't normally be my thing at all, but because I can look at it as a fantasy game first, I do love high fantasy. I love high fantasy a lot. And we have one player who does love pirates and nautical stuff, and he's the captain. He is into it 110%. His enthusiasm pulls everyone else along for it, which is great. I've also been using Sundered Isles, which is the pirate nautical supplement for Starforged. I've been using the random tables for that. Those are great, and they've made generating things much easier. It's a very cool game. It needed another round of dev edits, I think. We've done 16 sessions this first arc. We're going to take a break and do something else for a little bit, and then we're going to come back and do another arc on it. And I'm enjoying it a lot more than I thought I would when I first sat down and read the book and went, oh boy, was seeing some of the gaps.
I love the idea of conditions having missions attached. It's narrative subquests building procedurally from the experience.
That's really interesting because it does let you steer the player in a way and they don't have to spin it out from thin air.
The closest I got is like essentially they turn the stars and wishes into the XP system. So in other words, the players ask for things, and if they do it, they get XP, and the GM's job is to put them into the scenario. So that's player to the GM prompts in that way. This is classic GM to player prompt. That's a really interesting, useful thing that GM can offer people. What I was going to ask is, what happens if they don't?
If they have a condition on them, obviously hard moves can be worse. You can play the consequences out from that. But it's also a game where it does something I don't usually see in a lot of PBTA, which is the GM can apply penalties to your rolls. If someone has a condition that's going to be a negative, you can say, you're rolling with -1 additional on this. So there is a mechanical lever there, but there is a move to essentially confront and overcome your compels to clear that. And other players can also spend bonds to help you clear those things. So there are some other options, but it's looming over you.
I don't think any of my players would resist the fact that you've got to humiliate this person. They're like, yes, I definitely will. I was going to do it anyway.
It really gives in a different way than I've seen other games that do conditions. Mask has conditions and they apply penalties for certain actions. I love how flexible this is in comparison.
Why has there been this big wave of pirate games? No pun intended. And my friend Jim Rosignol, who I play with weekly, and he does the game Teeth, and they're of course doing Gold Teeth as well. So I've been close to him as he's been developing his. So I've been sort of comparing his choices to other people's choices. Like they're doing stuff, I'm not sure if it's reached the final game, but they've removed stress from Forged in the Dark and turned it into luck. But luck is a group skill. So the ship has a level of luck. So you get a real interesting Jonah type situation if someone's burning all the luck up and they throw them overboard. That's what they're digging into. All these different ideas. What is a pirate, I guess?
We've got Hell Whalers is out there that kind of hits that nautical theme.
The Morkboard Pirate one.
Morkboard Pirate. Pelgrane has the one about sea shanty hunters.
Yes.
The shanties are magic. I've got Cursed Captains of Cthulhu. I just got the Kickstarter for that. I don't know. I have no idea why pirates are on the table.
Back in the day when I first started editing fantasy magazine, it was the year of the pirate in that there were 3 different anthologies that were fantasy pirates and 2 different theme issues of magazines. And it was because Pirates of the Caribbean had just come out. And I'm always kind of suspicious when the zeitgeist is all bending in the same direction.
I'm about to start writing a pirate comic tomorrow. I've just realised it.
Okay.
There's a die episode about pirates, just because I'm going back to Stevenson in terms of like adventure fiction, but yeah, even I'm doing it, and I don't really like pirates.
The only thing I could think of is Our Flag Means Death.
Ah,
Oh, that could be.
They had Black Sails on before that, but I think Our Flag Means Death, that got a lot of people's attention.
Good.
All right, I'm going to move on to our second segment. For our second segment is Giving Me Life, but before we go to that, both of our guests here are writers, so I want to ask them what they had coming out now or that have just come out. Kieron, I know what has just come out. What's on the table right now that's happening?
a couple of weeks ago from like the recording, so it'll be out for a few months now. Die has returned with Die Loaded. It's a sequel to the 3 times Hugo nominated series. Look at me slide into professional mode.
Yes.
It's back with me and Stephanie Hands. Describe it as Goth Jumanji, a very serious take on the people dragged into the RPG story. So it's reclaiming and re-enchanting some of the horrific 1980s imagery of like, oh, maybe RPGs are evil. And the fact we kind of won the culture war makes us feel that we can play games of that now. It's a big meta history of the entire RPG form, juxtaposed with character, why do we play games anyway? The first series was very popular, the second one has launched and people like it so far. I was worried because there's a big twist halfway through the first issue that might not please people. Mm-hmm. And the other thing I'm doing is the Power Fantasy, which is a book with Caspar Wingard. It's a superpowered story. We take the very specific definition of superpower being you have the power of America's nuclear arsenal. So there's 6 people who are superpowers. If they ever fight, the world ends. So it's a story about a Cold War between people, and they're doing everything they can to avoid fighting. Watchmen with 6 Dr. Manhattans is one way of describing it. The other one is, if you and your 5 messiest mates were having a house share, and anytime you argued over the fridge being messy, the world ends. I think it's been influenced by The Bear on the Quiet, and it ticks along. Issue 16 will be out, probably by the time this comes out, and it's all getting troublesome. I'm only doing 2 comics at the moment, which is exciting.
Kat, you just had the final volume of...
Oh, look, I have it here. So this is the 4th book of the Tibet Quartet. Man, this took a long time to get finally finished up. I'm delighted, but it also felt very strange to sort of be like, okay, 15 years of working on that series. That was cool. I'm very happy to have that out. I have another collection coming out in the early spring from Hydra House, who's done a couple of my other collections. I have a short story coming out in the Magazine of Fantasy and Science Fiction when they finally reappear. This is all audio, so nobody's going to see this, but I had a project that the band Dream Theater did for their latest tour, and they asked different writers to do comic book stories for the different tracks. And so I cleverly picked a track with no words so I could do whatever I liked. It's called In the Arms of Morpheus. And it was the first time I'd done a comic book. You were talking, Kieron, about just how interesting it is to be thinking about it in different ways. It was so interesting to think about it in terms of what does the image have to be? What are the things that I want to be included in this panel? How do I want things to be arranged? And so that is, I believe, going to be available starting in January.
Excellent. I will make sure that I get links for everybody's things in the show notes as well. So, Kieron, if I may ask, what is giving you life?
First of all, I said I've got a 3-year-old. We watch very little TV. So it's kind of like always high rolls of can we get through an episode before anything explodes. We watched The Studio, the Apple TV show about a studio exec who's not particularly great at anything. And we loved it. Not every episode knocks it out the park, but the ones that knock it out the park into orbit, build a whole new park up there. And it's just very funny and awful. This love song to cinema was also mocking the entire concept of love songs to cinema. I laughed a lot. You mentioned, of course, Horst earlier, who is taking very an OSR approach to it. He is one of the hosts of the Smiling Fox, a podcast I've been listening to whilst I've been prepping Mythic Bastionland. It's just about Mythic Bastionland, breaking it down bit by bit. You've got 3 GMs doing it, and I think this is the best thing about it. Each one is a very different style. They're approaching the material in different ways, taking prompts in different directions. They have this bit where they describe a situation, and each of the GMs plus the guest say what they would have done. How would you have dealt with this in Mythic Bastionland? And the fact they're coming from different traditions and slightly different angles gives you different ways of thinking about it, and you triangulate where you see it. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
You feel my brain fizzing. but most of all, Thought Bubble. We're recording the weekend after Thought Bubble, TH, I can't pronounce my THs, which is my favourite comic con in the world. It's in Harrogate and Leeds. It's not huge, just about 12,000 people, I think, but it's pure comics.
Oh, wow.
Chloe Maiveld, the comic critic, hadn't been there before, and she summed it up quite succinctly. She hasn't saw a Funko Pop in 3 days. What I most love about it is it's not just like my bit of comics, which is, I'm going to say the phrase elevated genre. It's got people who are doing their first ever zine on a table next to like 60-year veterans, next to, people at Marvel, all the way around. You've got people at very different stages of their journey through comics, and it's just like this picture of the medium, what I love. And I always come back infused. I try to finish projects before going. I normally start something immediately after going back because I'm on fire.
Mm-hmm.
I started writing my book about how to write comics on Monday morning. I finally got around to doing it. If you're ever in north of England, just go, wander around, be rejuvenated. And also it's Harrogate, which is a Bath and Spa town, so you can walk around and pretend to be in a Jane Austen novel.
That's awesome. Kat, what is giving you life?
One is I've been really enjoying the whole genre of lit RPG. I got turned on to Dungeon Crawler Carl, and then I got a chance to talk to Matt Dinneman this summer and grabbed a reading list from him that I've been working my way through, and I'm just finishing the last book 12 of He Who Fights Monsters, which I really enjoyed. And I'm trying to kind of play around with a couple of lit RPG stories. I've also been enjoying Dropout TV, and particularly Brennan Lee Mulligan, and watching him DM. I love a DM that just goes, awesome, yes, you can do that, and then just goes nuts with it. And I just really admire his skills there. And the other is the podcast that I occasionally work with, the If This Goes On, Don't Panic, which is a science fiction punk, not funk, maybe funk too.
Hope funk would be fine.
Yeah. That sounds amazing.
But we have a lot of interesting guests, and we're about to interview Pray Me Mohammed. It's fun because when I get a chance to talk to writers and then get a chance to interview them, it's fun. I like doing that.
Awesome. For me, back in middle school, high school, college, I loved short horror fiction. Like that was my jam. I read everything contemporary, all of the Carl Wagner collections and the Ellen Datlow and everything I loved, short horror. Then at some point, a couple years after college, I just didn't read anymore. A few months ago, I started doing a Stephen King reread, but not the short stories, but a podcast, Just King Things podcast that analyzes the books, mentioned a horror author by the name of Michael Wehunt, who is from Georgia. I finally was like, okay, and I ordered 2 of his books, Greener Pastures and The Inconsolables. He's sort of self-described in the introduction as somewhere between Robert Aikman and Flannery O'Connor. I don't know how true that is, but they're great. They are amazing short stories. Some found footage short stories of horror in there, some linked stories. There's a really wonderful Ramsey Campbell homage in there that I didn't realize it was until afterwards, and it felt so Ramsey Campbell. There's a novella in the second one that revolves around mimes as an object of horror, and I had caught that on the back of the cover. It had mentioned that, and I was like, oh, this is not going to be good. Oh, no, it was good. It was shockingly good. This is some of the best short horror fiction I've read in years. It's dynamite, and I highly recommend it. So we will put links for all your stuff in the show notes. You've got the Wayward School for Writers. Kat will make a link to that. I know we will. Anything else you want to mention or plug, Kieron, before we wrap?
If you like my nonsense, my newsletter is the best way to stay in contact. It comes out semi-weekly. It's on Button Down, so buttondown.com/Kieron Gillen. The Substack exists, and if you Google, you'll get the Substack first because the internet's rubbish. I'm on BlueSky at Kieron Gillen. I also blog about games at Old Men Running the World with Jim Rosignol of Teeth fame, which is me writing nonsense because I can't control myself.
Excellent. And anything else you want to plug, Kat?
You can find me on most platforms as Cat Rambo. There's not that many Cat Rambos. There is one, if it's like shaman/medicine woman, that's not me. And if it is an Australian political scientist, that is not me. I'm the one that writes.
Excellent. The Open Hearth podcast is a production of the Open Hearth Gaming Community. It's an online gaming community that anyone can join. as I mentioned at the top of the show. We have a dedicated calendar app where folks can sign up for our sessions. You can also join our Discord, or if you want more information about everything that we do, you can check out openhearthgaming.com for more information. Hey, if you've enjoyed this show or any of our shows, please consider supporting our Patreon at patreon.com/openhearthgaming.com. We're on BlueSky, Tumblr, on Mastodon, Dice Camp. This is probably one of the early shows of the year, so we're looking forward to lots of different things going into 2026. And that means, please rate, subscribe, do all the things that they call for you, call to action at the end of these episodes. Imagine that we are doing it in a most persuasive way. Kat, Kieron, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
That was lovely.
And listeners, that's our show.